The pursuit of money and power is one of humanity's strongest desires. Yet only a few seriously consider the responsibility that comes with achieving such ambitions. Sudden success can cloud one's judgment, and the consequences can prove catastrophic. This is exactly what happened to the Foster family. 5 years before the fatal events, Christopher Edgill Foster and his daughter Kirsty settled into a luxurious estate. Their new home was located in the picturesque countryside of Shropshire, England. The historic manor with its spacious grounds included not only the historical building itself but also stables and numerous outbuildings. The vast property created ideal conditions for a fulfilling family life. There was plenty of space for raising children and keeping the family's beloved animals, horses and dogs. The place held not only practical value but also significant historical heritage. Paras viewed the estate as a paradise on earth. The Fosters gave the impression of being the perfect family, close-knit, loving, always together. They knew how to enjoy life and spend quality time together, regardless of circumstances. However, their peaceful life came to an abrupt end on January 26, 2008, when flames engulfed the estate on a Saturday. Neighbors, noticing fire bursting from the shattered windows, immediately called the emergency services at 999. When firefighters arrived at the scene, the inferno had already completely consumed the building. They watched helplessly as the roof collapsed, followed by the entire historic mansion. Taming the fire proved to be an extremely challenging task. The intensity of the burning was such that it seemed more like a massive fuel tank ablaze rather than a house. After the fire was finally extinguished, rescuers found only mountains of charred building debris. The destruction was immense. The primary task became finding the cause of the fire and possible victims. However, during the first days of investigation, no human remains were found. The fire investigators determined that the blaze was not accidental. Numerous pieces of evidence, including pipes found inside and traces of catalyst oil, pointed to deliberate arson. The fire destroyed not just the main building. The flames consumed the stables and garage with its collection of cars. In the center of the stables, they discovered the bodies of 2 horses and dogs belonging to Kirsty. The scene resembled a ritual burning of animals. The fate of the estate's 3 residents, Christopher, Jill, and Kirsty, remained unknown. Initially, there was hope they had survived, being away from home. However, the reality proved far more horrifying. The investigation established that on that fatal weekend, the Fosters had planned to celebrate Bankers' Day. Saturday's plans included visiting neighbors for a barbecue. On Sunday, they had invited guests themselves, including Chris's mother. The woman couldn't make it, and the meeting had to be cancelled. She had no idea that phone conversation with her son would be their last. A few days later, on Tuesday, Chris's mother arrived at the estate with her younger son Andrew. But this wasn't a festive visit, the circumstances were far more tragic. Law enforcement had contacted Christopher's mother to inform her about the tragic event. At that time, the investigation was actively gathering any information possible, as the Fosters' whereabouts remained unknown. Officers hoped the mother might shed light on where Christopher, Jill, and their daughter might be. The woman was bewildered. The family hadn't planned any trips or vacations. This fact immediately caused her concern. At first, the mother suspected that faulty wiring in the old house might have caused the tragedy. However, forensic investigators held a different view, pointing to signs of deliberate arson. The incident instantly captured media and public attention. No wonder a mysterious fire at the estate of the well-known millionaire Christopher Foster and his family. Various rumors spread across the country, and newspapers were filled with sensational headlines. The situation was further fueled by the lack of concrete information from police and firefighters. To uncover the truth, tons of debris had to be cleared. Meanwhile, searches for the family were conducted at transportation hubs, airports, and train stations, but to no avail. A breakthrough came during the clearing of the first floor. Due to the scale of the work, a special team of about 200 workers was brought in. During the debris removal, one of the workers stumbled upon something unusual material that differed from the typical burnt building remains. The investigation revealed unexpected details about Christopher Foster's life. The successful businessman had been drowning in lawsuits and accusations in recent years. This came as a real shock to relatives. They had no idea about his legal problems until the fatal January fire. It turned out that the man was experiencing a serious financial crisis, something he had never faced before. Investigators were convinced of the fire's intentional nature. Given his financial difficulties, this could have been an attempt to stage a disappearance to flee the country. However, all attempts to track down the family remained futile, only intensifying suspicions. When forensic investigators first entered the burnt ruins, they faced a complex task, conducting a thorough examination of the ruins to establish the point of ignition and search for possible human remains. Initially, it seemed there were no bodies, but a more detailed inspection of the ashes proved otherwise. The problem lay in the extreme degree of destruction of the remains. Experts managed to find only individual bones and teeth. The first human remains were discovered near the fireplace on the first floor. They were noticed due to their characteristic spongy structure, which differed from building debris. Laboratory analysis confirmed these were burned human bones. Beneath the first partially preserved skeleton lay a second one. Based on their sizes, experts determined they were the remains of Jill and Christopher. Forensic investigators paid special attention to skull fragments. They indicated that the woman had died from a gunshot wound. It took almost 24 hours to collect and reconstruct parts of the skull. The discovery of a .22 caliber rifle near the bodies and a burned bullet, found after several hours of sifting through ashes with a sieve, definitively confirmed the murder theory. The discovery of dead horses and dogs of the Foster family presented investigators with a puzzling question. If this was a robbery, why would the perpetrator waste time killing animals? Such a level of brutality was uncharacteristic for this quiet area, forcing experienced detectives to consider increasingly darker scenarios. A breakthrough in the investigation came thanks to surviving footage from external surveillance cameras. Though of low quality, they captured a male figure. The unknown person, armed with a rifle fitted with what appeared to be a silencer, repeatedly moved between the stables and the house. The cameras recorded the moment when the animals were shot, after which the man returned to the mansion. Subsequent events remained off camera. Identifying the perpetrator became a priority task. An unexpected turn occurred when the Foster's brother reviewed the recordings. He recognized Christopher himself in the figure. This version initially seemed incredible to detectives, but comparative analysis confirmed the striking resemblance. The video footage showed the man walking the defined route several times before the first signs of fire appeared. The evidence pointed to a horrifying scenario.
Ранее не встречались с такими жуткими преступлениями.
However, the fate of their daughter Kirsty remained unknown. Her remains weren't among the initial findings. Kirsty was known as a cheerful, active girl. She enjoyed swimming and sailing, and had a special talent for working with animals. Knowing her character, many hoped the nimble girl had managed to escape the tragedy. The reality proved far more tragic. After 3 days of searching for the parents' remains, it took another 6 days to find the daughter's body. She was found in her own bed in the children's room, completely destroyed by fire. When the fire destroyed the floor supports, the bed with the girl's body collapsed to the lower floor. The room's location, far from the fire's epicenter, theoretically gave her a chance to escape. However, the investigation showed that the girl made no attempt to flee, likely being already dead before the fire started. The discovery of 15-year-old Kirsty's remains was devastating for all relatives. They had held on to hope for her survival until the very end. The condition of the body was so horrific that bones crumbled at the slightest touch, forcing investigators to collect evidence literally using brushes. At this stage, the investigation had formed a clear version of events. According to their conclusions, on the evening of August 26 at the Osbaston house in Maesbrook, Christopher Foster carried out a horrific plan. He killed his family and pets, set fire to the property, and then took his own life. This theory was supported by numerous pieces of evidence, especially the irrefutable surveillance camera footage. The biggest mystery in the case was the stark contrast between the committed crime and Christopher's personality as known by his close ones. None of his associates could believe that the successful businessman, caring father, and loving husband was capable of such brutality. The investigation needed to uncover what drove a person to destroy their entire world, from family members to beloved pets and collector cars. The tragedy shocked the entire country, but the families of Jill and Christopher were most desperate for answers. 50-year-old Foster seemed to have achieved everything one could dream of. He had built a successful career, created a strong family, and maintained warm relationships with all relatives, including his wife's family. The image of a caring father who accompanied Kirsty even during her riverside rope swing adventures was completely at odds with the role of a murderer. Friends and relatives unanimously described Christopher as a kind, loving person. Even when shown video evidence of the crime, they refused to believe their eyes. Christopher's life path was a story of persistence and determination. From his early years, he consistently achieved his goals, making his family proud and always supporting those who needed his help. A pivotal moment in his career came with the tragedy on an oil platform in the late 1980s. Watching the catastrophe on television that took over 100 lives, Christopher was deeply affected. This inspired him to create an innovative fire protection material, special insulation for oil rigs. After numerous experiments, he developed a unique sealant that formed a protective shell instead of igniting when exposed to fire. After obtaining the patent, Foster faced a new challenge: convincing investors. He risked everything by organizing a large-scale demonstration of his invention through simulating an oil fire. He hired experts and firefighters at his own expense. The risk paid off. The successful test attracted investors. The business flourished incredibly fast. The company began earning millions installing fire protection systems in the oil industry. However, success and wealth gradually changed Christopher. He started boasting about his multimillionaire status and spent enormous sums on ostentatious luxury. The family threw parties costing over £20,000 sterling. His personal life also underwent changes. Jill, his wife, described as decent but somewhat naive housewife, began to suspect marital infidelity. According to close ones, Christopher had at least 8 extramarital affairs, skillfully hiding them from his wife. 5 years before the tragedy, Foster purchased the luxurious estate in Osbaston for £1.5 million sterling. He invested significant funds in its improvement, built a pool, installed fountains, equipped stables, carried out major renovations, and bought new furniture. His collection of expensive cars continuously grew. Christopher never tired of emphasizing that everything was paid for in cash, without any debts. The choice of a remote estate in Osbaston wasn't random. Christopher sought to create a secure family haven. It was here that he developed a new hobby that later took on threatening proportions. The proximity of large woodland areas allowed him to devote considerable time to hunting and shooting. For, sometimes more times a week, he would go pheasant hunting and also became passionate about clay pigeon shooting. Gradually, this hobby evolved into a true obsession with firearms. Foster began collecting expensive rifles and pistols, placing them in every large room of the mansion. One of these weapons was later found in the ashes. Over time, disturbing changes appeared in Christopher's behavior. He became irritable and aggressive. A telling incident occurred when Jill's pigeons flew into his barn. After unsuccessful attempts to drive them out, he coldly shot the birds, ignoring his wife's tears. An even more chilling incident happened when Kirsty's black Labrador accidentally bit him during play. Christopher, despite his daughter's pleas, led the dog away and shot it. However, no one could predict that these warning signs would escalate into the horrific tragedy of that January weekend in 2008, when Foster methodically destroyed his family, pets, and himself. Reconstructing the chronology of events became a challenging task for investigators. Even confirming the gunshot wounds required painstakingly reconstructing the victim's skulls piece by piece. It took the police 2 months to reconstruct the events of that fatal night of August 26. It all began innocently enough that evening. The Fosters were relaxing at their neighbors, having a barbecue and enjoying clay pigeon shooting. Christopher was in excellent spirits, joking throughout the evening. The family returned home around 8:30 p.m., arriving at the house at midnight. The last semblance of normal family life occurred when Christopher ordered his daughter to go to bed and turned off the internet due to her disobedience. Kirsty's last SMS to friends about her father's bad mood became her final words. The subsequent events had to be pieced together meticulously. The only undisputed fact was Jill's murder by a gunshot to the head at close range. Determining the causes of death for Christopher and Kirsty was complicated by the condition of the remains. Only a third of their skulls and a few teeth were preserved. Forensic experts sifted through approximately 4 tons of ash trying to find additional fragments, but unsuccessfully. Particularly frustrating was the destruction of key bone areas where bullet traces might have been preserved. The case seemed to have reached a dead end. An unexpected breakthrough came with the discovery of surviving footage from internal surveillance cameras. They captured Christopher's chilling sequence of actions, first shooting his wife in the master bedroom, then his daughter. At 3:10 a.m., armed with a silenced rifle, he headed to the dog kennels and stables. Within 11 minutes, he methodically killed all the animals, shooting both horses and dogs in the head, having first corralled the dogs into a pen to prevent their escape. After completing his killing spree of the animals, Christopher dragged their bodies together and set fire to the stables. To prevent any possible rescue of the animals by neighbors, he even positioned a van against the gates and shot out its tires. The investigation later revealed that not all animals died from gunshots, some suffocated in the smoke. Residents of neighboring houses heard shots over 15 minutes, but, in the night's silence, mistook them for distant hunting. It wasn't until around 4 in the morning, when they noticed the fire's glow, that they called emergency services. In destroying his own estate, Christopher displayed a grim irony by using his professional knowledge of fire protection in reverse. He ran flexible hoses into the house and pumped in about 200 liters of oil from the basement's technical fluid storage. The animals' bodies were also doused with fuel, though in smaller quantities, which is why their remains were better preserved, allowing investigators to reconstruct their final moments. After setting fire to the barn with the animals, Christopher quickly returned to the house. In the ground floor living room, he ignited the oil, then ran up to the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. There, he most likely shot himself, though it's possible he may have suffocated in the smoke. By choosing the upper floor, he effectively eliminated any chance of survival. The motive for this horrific tragedy began to emerge thanks to an observant neighbor who noticed Christopher's strange behavior in his final days. He barely left the estate and focused solely on household tasks, unusual for a successful businessman. The key to understanding the situation was a letter delivered a week before the tragedy. Court bailiffs were notifying him that the estate was being seized. Jill, Christopher's wife, was completely unaware of the scale of her husband's financial problems. Not prone to extravagance and uninvolved in financial matters, she had no idea that the crisis had begun as far back as 2004. The contrast between his public image as a successful multimillionaire who boasted about buying the mansion in cash and reality was stark. The true picture was revealed by Foster's former accountant. In 2005, a conflict arose between them over unpaid debts to sealant suppliers and employees. It turned out that Christopher, while being a brilliant inventor, proved to be a poor businessman. He had no proper business plan and hadn't calculated production costs accurately. The attempt to find a cheaper manufacturer didn't save the situation, as it coincided with the global financial crisis that crashed sales. Warehouses were full of unsold product, while Christopher continued living lavishly, spending money on luxury instead of paying debts. The situation deteriorated rapidly, mounting debts to suppliers, unpaid employee wages, Complaints about business management. Having a promising product that could have brought significantly greater profits under proper management, Christopher had trapped himself financially. Trying to maintain his accustomed lifestyle, he began taking enormous loans from various banks, hundreds of thousands of pounds monthly. The interest on these loans grew while his ability to pay them diminished. By early February 2008, his debt exceeded £300,000. Foster suffered his biggest blow in September 2007 when he lost a court case to a supplier and his company, leaving him over £1 million in debt. Hiding his year-long inactivity from everyone, he continued maintaining his image as a successful multimillionaire, sinking deeper into debt. His obsession with firearms alone cost over £100,000, not including maintenance costs for the collection. By November 2007, his bank account was empty, and his total debt had reached £4 million, an amount impossible to cover even by selling all his assets. Occasionally, warning signs broke through his facade of prosperity. In one of his last conversations with his brother in November, Christopher hinted at his own inadequacy, though he didn't reveal details. His brother dismissed this as possible illness or alcohol effects, unaware of the true scale of the problems. Even after all circumstances were revealed, it was difficult to comprehend the logic behind destroying not just himself, but his family, animals, and property worth millions. In conversations with business partners, Christopher had hinted at his difficulties and made gloomy predictions, but never revealed the complete picture. 5 months before the tragedy, he began taking antidepressants prescribed by his doctor, which temporarily stabilized his condition. However, on the last Friday before the tragedy, he was observed visiting suicide-related websites. In a twist of fate, court bailiffs arrived at the estate hours after the fire to seize property that had already turned to ashes. The investigation revealed a poignant detail. Before death, Christopher lay down beside his murdered wife, embracing her one last time. Experts classified this case as a typical example of a family annihilator, someone who, having decided to end their own life, takes everything they love with them. The exact cause of Christopher's death couldn't be determined due to the condition of the remains. It's unknown whether he shot himself or suffocated in the smoke next to his wife. 4 months later, the funeral took place. At the insistence of Jill's family, mother and daughter were buried together, while Christopher was buried separately. The victims' relatives couldn't forgive him not only for killing their loved ones but also for his actions that left dozens of creditors without hope of recovering their money. Chris's relatives attributed the tragedy to his excessive pride and detachment from reality. Having created an illusion of a perfect life and losing it, he proved unable to accept the collapse of his world. His final days resembled the agony of a trapped animal, but the price of this agony proved unconscionably high, several innocent lives. And now, this story comes to an end. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss new episodes. Leave your comments and share your thoughts on today's story. See you next time and stay safe.